Blood smeared the torn first-class ticket as 17-year-old Noah Halston clutched his hand, stunned by the woman who just accused him of fraud, and slashed his skin with the very proof of his innocence. His brother Caleb stood frozen, helpless, as security closed in. All because their clothes didn't scream wealth. All because they looked out of place. What no one knew, yet, was that these two teenagers were the sons of Benjamin Halston, the CEO of Atlas Air, and the woman who humiliated them? She wasn't acting alone. What started as a public insult would unravel an entire system. Watch closely. O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the usual pre-flight chaos, rolling suitcases, impatient murmurs, boarding calls echoing off tile and steel. Amid the noise, two teenagers made their way toward the sleek glass panel marking the first-class check-in lane of Atlas Air. Caleb Halston, tall and lean in a worn bomber jacket and black jeans, moved with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. His brother Noah trailed slightly behind, earbuds in, head down, hoodie up. A subtle act of shielding himself from the world. Both looked out of place among the pressed suits and designer handbags. They weren't out of place. Caleb clutched an envelope labeled in block letters. Flight 327, CDG, First Class. Their father, Benjamin Halston, had left it on the kitchen counter that morning, sealed with a note. Proud of you both. Enjoy Paris, Dad. It was a long-promised graduation gift, a dream trip before college began in the fall. They had earned it. What they hadn't earned, apparently, was the suspicion in the eyes of the first-class gate agent. From behind the podium, Agent Whitaker scanned the approaching boys with immediate disapproval. Her crisp navy uniform, pearl earrings, and tightly coiled bun screamed professionalism, but her eyes narrowed like a hunter spotting prey. "Excuse me," she said, stepping in front of the electronic kiosk. "This line is for first class only." Caleb stopped, blinked. "We know. We're on flight 327 to Paris. First class." He held up the envelope. Lorraine's smile was thin. "You must be mistaken. Perhaps your parents are." "We're not mistaken," Noah said, his voice quiet but firm. He pulled out his passport. "Our tickets are in there." Lorraine hesitated a beat too long before taking the envelope, her manicured fingers plucking it like it carried disease. She unfolded the tickets and scanned them with exaggerated slowness, her mouth twisted. "And how exactly did you get these?" Caleb's eyebrows lifted. "Our father bought them." "Is he with you?" "He's meeting us at the gate," Noah said. "Business emergency this morning." Lorraine pursed her lips. "I'll need the credit card used for purchase." "We don't have it," Caleb replied. "It was a gift." The line behind them began to shift uncomfortably. A man in a navy suit checked his watch with an audible sigh. An older woman peered over her sunglasses, curious. Lorraine stared at the tickets again. "You'll need to verify your identity and explain how minors ended up with $12,000 seats." "We're 18, Noah said. "Legal adults." "Barely," Lorraine muttered. Then louder, "We've had instances of ticket fraud. I'll need to verify these." "We've done nothing wrong," Caleb said, stepping forward. "Can you please just scan the tickets?" Lorraine didn't move. She glanced at the gate agent beside her, whispered something. The agent looked down quickly, pretending not to hear. "What's the problem?" Noah asked. "These tickets look suspicious." Lorraine held them up to the light, as if searching for flaws in the ink. "In fact, I believe these may be counterfeit." "What?" Caleb's voice rose. "Please step aside," she said. "Security has been called." "You called security?" Noah asked. "For what?" "You've presented suspicious documents. We need to be sure they weren't obtained fraudulently." "This is insane," Caleb muttered. "Just scan them." But Lorraine didn't. Instead, in one swift motion, she ripped both tickets in half. The sound, harsh, sudden, cut through the terminal's ambient noise like a gunshot. "What the hell?" Caleb lunged forward. Noah reached at the same time, grabbing for the pieces. One sharp edge sliced across his palm. He yelped and recoiled. Blood welled instantly, dripping onto the polished tile floor. "Oh, wonderful," Lorraine said, stepping back with theatrical indignation. "Now he's attacking me." "Are you kidding me?" Caleb shouted. "You tore our tickets." "He's bleeding," a voice murmured behind them. Phones were raised, cameras already recording. "I need security at gate 17 immediately," Lorraine snapped into her radio. "We have 2 hostile passengers attempting to board first class with fraudulent documents." Noah clutched his hand, breath shallow. "I'm bleeding because of her. She cut me with our own ticket." "I suggest you step away from the check-in area," Lorraine said, "before this escalates." "No," Caleb said, jaw clenched. "This is already escalated. You just accused us of theft, ripped our tickets, and hurt my brother." People stared now. The businessman from earlier had his phone out. The older woman gasped audibly. The gate agent looked like she might cry. "I'm warning you," Lorraine said. "Security is on its way." "You can't do this," Noah whispered, voice trembling. "We did nothing wrong." Lorraine looked him over, her gaze dripping with contempt. "People like you don't just belong in first class." A collective inhale rippled through the bystanders. That's when the voice came, low but commanding. "What the hell is going on here?" Heads turned. Benjamin Halston strode through the terminal like a man born to own the space. 6'2" in a charcoal gray suit, silver at his temples, presence heavy as a thundercloud. He wasn't flanked by assistants. He didn't need an introduction. Half the terminal recognized his face from business magazines. The other half recognized the fury in his eyes. "Dad," Caleb started. Benjamin ignored him, taking in the scene. The blood on Noah's hand, the ripped tickets. Lorraine, now pale and backing up. "I repeat," he said, voice steel. "What the hell is going on here?" The moment Benjamin Halston stepped into the fray, the air in the terminal seemed to shift. Conversations halted, phones lowered instinctively. The aura around him, confidence, precision, command, wasn't cultivated for show. It was the byproduct of decades leading from the front, both in the skies and the boardroom. Lorraine Whitaker, who only seconds ago had wielded her authority like a sword, now visibly withered under the weight of his gaze. Benjamin took 2 strides toward his sons. He reached for Noah's hand first, inspecting the gash with practiced calm. Blood had stained his son's hoodie sleeve. His jaw clenched. "You all right?" he asked, voice soft enough that only Noah and Caleb heard it. Noah nodded, but there was pain in his eyes, not just from the cut, but from the humiliation. Benjamin turned, now addressing Lorraine. "You tore up their tickets?" Lorraine opened her mouth, but no words came out. She blinked rapidly. They presented fraudulent documentation. I followed protocol." Benjamin raised a brow. "Protocol includes physically destroying documents and causing bodily harm. I didn't mean to hurt." "You did." Security arrived just then. 2 uniformed guards flanking a supervisor. One of them made eye contact with Benjamin and froze. "Sir," the supervisor began. "They're with me," Benjamin said firmly. "These are my sons. Any attempt to detain them will become a legal matter you're not equipped to handle." The guards backed off immediately. The ripple effect of that revelation was immediate. Passengers gasped. One woman actually dropped her phone. The businessman who'd been recording whispered something that sounded like, "That's him, the founder of Atlas." Lorraine paled further. "Mr. Halston, I didn't realize—" "No," he said. "You didn't, and you didn't care to ask." He turned toward the gate agent, who was now trembling behind the podium. "Print new boarding passes. First class, Flight 327 to Paris, now." The agent nodded so fast it looked painful. Benjamin reached into his inner coat pocket and produced a monogrammed handkerchief. He gently wrapped it around Noah's hand. "We'll have medical take a look before boarding." Caleb stood still, his face a storm of emotion. "Dad, she accused us of stealing." "I know," Benjamin said. His voice remained even, but Caleb could hear the thunder building underneath. The murmurs around them grew louder as more travelers realized what they were witnessing. Benjamin Halston, war hero turned aviation mogul, the self-made founder of Atlas Air, was now confronting his own airline's frontline staff, on camera, for humiliating his sons. It didn't take long for the footage to hit social media. 20 years earlier, Benjamin Halston had been just another combat pilot stationed in the Middle East. Flight commander, Distinguished Flying Cross. The kind of soldier who didn't care for medals, only missions. When he returned home, he didn't have a corporate safety net or family fortune, just a relentless drive to build something that would matter. He started as a freight route manager for a small cargo airline in Ohio. Nights were spent sketching aircraft design improvements, mapping fuel-efficient flight paths, drafting what would become his business model. Atlas Air began with 3 retrofitted cargo planes and a rented hangar. 20 years later, it had grown into one of the top 5 transatlantic carriers in the world. Through it all, Benjamin had one rule: no special treatment for his family. That included Caleb and Noah. He wanted them grounded, both literally and figuratively. They rode coach, earned their own allowances, mowed lawns in the neighborhood each summer. Their private schooling wasn't about elitism. It was about giving them the tools to build their own way forward. If someone respects you only when they know your last name, he often told them, they don't respect you. They fear your influence. I don't want that for you. The boys learned humility from an early age, but they also learned dignity, which is why what happened at Gate 17 cut so deep. Back in the present, in a private VIP medical room near the terminal, a nurse gently cleaned Noah's hand. Caleb sat beside him, still fuming. Benjamin paced. "Dad," Caleb said, voice low. "She didn't just act out of line. She tried to make everyone think we were scammers." Benjamin didn't respond right away. He was staring at a muted television screen on the wall. News alert graphics flashed under shaky phone video of the incident. One anchor's voiceover read, "Sons of Benjamin Halston, CEO of Atlas Air." "I know," Benjamin said finally. "You're not going to let this slide, are you?" Caleb asked. His father turned. The storm in his eyes had sharpened. "No," Benjamin said. "But I'm not just firing a gate agent." He walked toward the wall, tapped the screen to unmute the audio. The news anchor's voice filled the room. "Sources close to Atlas Air say the company has launched an internal review. Meanwhile, public outcry grows as video of the incident at O'Hare International." Benjamin muted the TV again. "This isn't about one woman," he said. "It's about a culture that gave her permission." He sat across from his sons. "You did the right thing. You stayed calm. You didn't escalate." "She cut me," Noah said, voice hollow. "And she's going to regret that. But not just because she hurt you. Because she revealed something broken in the company I built, and I intend to fix it." Outside, media vans began setting up. Inside, Benjamin was already on the phone with Lydia Marsh, his director of communications. "Start pulling internal complaint data," he said. "Last 5 years. I want to know how many passengers have reported discriminatory behavior and what happened to those reports." Lydia paused. "Should I keep this confidential?" "For now," he said. "But not for long. If there's rot under the floorboards, I want sunlight on every inch of it." In the corner, Caleb looked at his brother. Noah met his gaze. They weren't just passengers anymore. They were the lightning rods that had just sparked a corporate reckoning. Lorraine Whitaker sat alone in a backroom conference suite tucked behind the airport lounge, her hands trembling as she stared down at her phone. The video had gone viral. Her name was trending, for all the wrong reasons. But this wasn't panic. It was anger. She had done what she was told. She had followed instructions, adhered to guidelines whispered in meetings and outlined in back-channel emails. This wasn't supposed to blow up. Not like this. The text message she'd been dreading buzzed on her phone. A name flashed across the screen. E.S. She knew better than to reply. Their conversations never existed in writing beyond one-word nudges, vague timestamps, and face-to-face directives. That was the point. but her stomach twisted as she opened the message anyway. "Hold position. We'll manage it." No apology, no offer to protect her reputation, just a command. Typical Everett Sharpe. Vice President of Finance and Strategic Operations, Sharpe had a reputation for being invisible until he needed to be seen. And when he was, it was already too late for his enemies. Lorraine had worked under him informally for over a year now, ever since she'd been brought into a hush-hush program to elevate Atlas's premium experience. Back then, the pitch had sounded logical, even noble. Sharpe had spoken in glossy phrases like brand integrity and preserving the exclusivity of luxury. But beneath the PR polish was something darker, a list. A literal internal list circulated among certain team leaders titled Passengers of Concern. Lorraine had been one of several senior crew members trained to quietly maintain standards in first class. There was no official policy. That was the genius of it. The list was never acknowledged in writing beyond initials and gate assignments, but the implication was clear. Younger travelers, solo flyers in casual attire, people whose accents, last names, or demeanor didn't fit the silent profile of what Atlas thought first class should be. It had started subtly. Double-checking tickets, asking for extra ID, giving preference to established profiles, meaning corporate accounts, recognizable executives, frequent flyers in tailored suits. Over time, it escalated. Lorraine, who had once prided herself on discretion, found herself rejecting passengers outright. She hadn't questioned it until now. She remembered Sharpe's voice, smooth and calculated. "It's not discrimination if they don't know they're being filtered. You're just protecting the brand." And she had believed him. Now she sat, shaking, her face plastered across every major news outlet, while Sharpe remained invisible. Across town, Benjamin Halston's executive boardroom at Atlas Air headquarters buzzed with tension. "I want access to the staffing audit from Q2, Benjamin said to Lydia Marsh, who had flown back immediately after the gate incident. Every name flagged for review by Agent Whitaker and her team in the last 6 months. "On it," Lydia replied, fingers flying over her tablet. "And Benjamin, something's off. The number of first-class denials has doubled since last year. Most of them aren't logged as incidents. They're classified as procedural escalations." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. Escalations to who? Lydia hesitated. The system shows final clearance was handled by Everett Sharpe's office. Sharpe. Benjamin stood slowly. "Get him in here. Now." Back at the airport, Lorraine tucked her phone away and composed herself just as a man in a gray wool coat approached. He moved like someone who didn't want attention but always had it. "Whitaker," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Sharpe," she said, trying to keep her tone steady. "I followed protocol. Exactly what we agreed. They fit the profile. Unaccompanied teens, dressed like backpackers. I said, manage optics," he snapped. "You tore their tickets. You cut the kid's hand." "That was an accident." "You created a spectacle," he hissed. "And you did it to the CEO's sons. You never told me who they were. You weren't supposed to need that information. Your job was to use judgment, quiet pressure, not turn Gate 17 into a war zone." Lorraine's voice cracked. "You said this would protect the brand." Sharpe leaned in closer. "And now it's your face on every screen from LAX to LaGuardia. The narrative is shifting from security to discrimination." Her mouth opened in protest, but Sharpe raised a hand. "Damage control is already underway. HR will suspend you pending review. Lay low. Do not speak to the press." "You're hanging me out to dry." "No, I'm keeping the company from burning down," Sharpe said. "You'll be compensated. Silently. But if you speak out, if you link me to this, there will be consequences." With that, he turned and vanished into the crowd like a shadow at sunset. At Atlas headquarters, Everett Sharpe arrived 30 minutes late to the emergency board meeting. He didn't apologize. "Everett," Benjamin said, keeping his voice cool, I'd like you to explain why frontline staff are routing passenger issues through your office. Sharpe shrugged. I'm part of operational integrity. We oversee risk mitigation. Ticket verification isn't high-level risk, Benjamin said. And yet, gate decisions are being reviewed by finance? Sharpe smiled faintly. Brand integrity is financial. Lydia cut in. We've reviewed the logs. Over 200 first-class boardings were challenged this quarter alone. Most involved young, minority, or casually dressed passengers. Your name is linked to every override. Correlation isn't causation, Sharpe replied. And unless someone can prove discriminatory intent, Benjamin held up a hand. We will. Silence fell. Sharpe's eyes darkened. Be careful, Benjamin. You're assuming malice where there may be only prudence. No, Benjamin said. I'm assuming rot, and I intend to root it out. Lorraine stared at her reflection in the stainless steel of the staff restroom. She wiped her face and fixed her bun. She had made a mistake, yes, but she hadn't acted alone. And if Atlas planned to make her the scapegoat, she wasn't going down quietly. She pulled out her phone. This time, she didn't text ES. She opened the contacts folder, scrolled past names she'd once trusted, and tapped a new one she'd saved the night before. Channel 7, Investigative Unit. She hesitated only a moment before pressing call. It was time for the truth to come out. The air around Gate 17 had thickened to something almost tangible, something electric, weighted with silence. The din of the terminal faded to background static as Benjamin Halston's voice cut through it all. What the hell is going on here? The words didn't need to be shouted. His voice, deep and deliberate, resonated with the kind of authority that didn't require volume. People stopped mid-step. Conversations died. Even the ever-present chime of the gate speaker seemed to fall silent. Lorraine Whitaker froze, mid-motion, her face draining of color as her eyes locked onto his. She stepped back instinctively, like someone encountering a predator they'd only ever seen behind glass. Mr. Halston, she stammered, the syllables brittle. I didn't know. Benjamin ignored her. His focus was on Noah, who was still cradling his injured hand in a napkin hastily provided by a bystander. Blood had seeped through the makeshift bandage, soaking into his hoodie cuff. Let me see, Benjamin said softly, kneeling to Noah's level. Caleb stepped aside silently, his jaw clenched, his fists still balled. Noah's hand trembled slightly as he extended it. Benjamin unwrapped the napkin slowly, carefully, and pulled back the fabric of his son's sleeve. The cut wasn't deep, but it had bled more than expected, and the skin around it was raised and red. Benjamin exhaled through his nose. Not a sigh, but the kind of slow breath one takes to keep fury from spilling over. He stood, turned to Lorraine. You tore up their tickets, he said, each word falling like a stone. You made a scene. You accused my sons of theft, and now... He gestured to Noah's hand. You've drawn blood. Lorraine opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't realize who they were, she offered weakly. If I'd known. Benjamin's tone turned sharper, cutting. If you'd known, you wouldn't have humiliated them? That's not what I meant. No, he said, voice now steel. That's exactly what you meant. You saw two boys. You didn't see wealth. You didn't see power. So you assumed fraud. He stepped closer, close enough that Lorraine instinctively backed into the gate podium. Her hands fumbled behind her for balance. He wasn't yelling. That made it worse. Benjamin lifted his son's hand gently, holding it up between them. See this? He said, showing her the jagged red line across Noah's skin. This is the result of what you did. You just did the worst thing a person in your position can do, he said. You acted with arrogance, not judgment. With prejudice, not protocol. The gate area was silent. Every passenger nearby was listening, some with eyes wide, others shame-faced. The businessman who'd once muttered about delays now looked away. The older couple who'd raised eyebrows earlier now stared at the floor. You don't represent my airline, Benjamin continued, stepping back. You represent everything I built Atlas to overcome." Lorraine seemed to shrink before their eyes. Benjamin turned to the gate agent beside her. "Medical, now!" The young woman nodded frantically and scrambled to call the on-site medical team. Noah shifted uncomfortably. Caleb still hadn't spoken. His eyes were locked on Lorraine, but not with hatred, just disbelief. Benjamin gently touched both his son's shoulders. "Let's get you cleaned up." But even as he said it, he turned back to Lorraine one final time. "You didn't just make a mistake," he said. "You exposed a disease, and I will make sure it doesn't spread." 15 minutes later, they sat in the medical room down the hall. A nurse carefully disinfected and bandaged Noah's palm while Benjamin paced behind her, phone pressed to his ear. No containment statements," he said into the phone. "This doesn't get handled with PR fluff. I want every gate interaction from the last 12 months reviewed. Start with Lorraine Whitaker's shift records, then expand." He paused, listening. "Send Lydia everything. She's coordinating now." He hung up. Noah looked up. "Is she going to get fired?" "She's going to get investigated," Benjamin said. "So is everyone who trained her, enabled her, or looked the other way." Caleb finally spoke. "Why do they even think like that? Why does how we dress matter more than what our names are?" Benjamin stopped pacing. "Because people are taught to trust patterns, but they rarely question who designed the pattern in the first place." The nurse finished dressing Noah's wound and smiled politely, offering water bottles. "You boys going to be okay?" Noah nodded. "We're fine." Caleb looked to his father. "What about you?" Benjamin paused. "I'm furious," he said. "But not because of today. Because I built this company to be better than this, and somehow that wasn't enough." Back at the gate, Lorraine remained frozen, still trying to decide whether to sit, to flee, to hide. The gate agent beside her finally whispered, "They've taken him to medical. Mr. Halston said you're suspended." "I know," she muttered. The agent hesitated. "Why did you do it?" Lorraine didn't answer. She just stared out the window, watching the tarmac shimmer under the afternoon sun. In her mind, Sharpe's voice echoed. "Filter quietly. Maintain brand image. If they can't prove intent, they can't prove damage." Only now, she realized, damage had already been done. On camera, in real time, to the sons of the most powerful man in the terminal. And perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't the only one who would fall. In the medical lounge, Benjamin finally sat beside his sons. "You know," he said, looking at Noah, "when you were 6, you fell off the jungle gym and sliced your hand on a rock." Noah blinked. "I remember. You wrapped it in your necktie." Benjamin smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd have to do that again at an airport." There was a beat of silence. Caleb spoke. "So, what now?" Benjamin looked at them both. "Now," he said, "now we stop pretending this company is what I hoped it would be, and we start making it what it needs to be." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and offered his hand to Noah. "Let's board that flight." By the time Flight 327 lifted off from Chicago, the digital firestorm was already raging at cruising altitude. Within 2 hours, Hatch Atlas bias had surged to the top trending topic in the United States, beating out celebrity gossip, sports trades, and even a congressional hearing. The video of Lorraine Whitaker ripping tickets and accusing the Halston twins of fraud had been shared over 3.2 million times. Memes spawned. Comment threads exploded. Debates ignited. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a symbol. The sons of Atlas Air's own CEO, publicly humiliated, wounded, and nearly barred from boarding because they didn't look the part. And the internet, fueled by outrage and incredulity, wasn't letting go. At Atlas Air headquarters, Lydia Marsh sat alone in the company's Crisis Operations Center, a nondescript suite with 4 wall-mounted monitors, a humming server rack, and an industrial-strength coffee machine that hadn't stopped brewing since dawn. A veteran of 2 major PR disasters at her last firm in New York, she was composed but alert, like a surgeon during triage. She tapped through incoming alerts on her dashboard, media requests, employee DMs, legal department flags. But her focus was on something deeper. 3 years ago, before she joined Atlas, the airline had quietly restructured its internal brand oversight committee, an innocuous name for what essentially functioned as a high-level image control board. That committee, officially disbanded 18 months ago, had included representatives from finance, customer experience, operations, and one shadowy name that kept recurring in internal memos: Everett Sharpe. She pulled up archived emails from the digital compliance database. Most were scrubbed, sterile language about enhancing brand cohesion and optimizing passenger fit. But then she cross-referenced them against old employee exit interviews. One flagged note stood out. A gate agent who left the company 16 months ago had written anonymously, "We're not trained to serve, we're trained to screen." They won't say profile out loud, but everyone knows what it means. Lydia's fingers moved faster. She ran a search for internal communications tagged with first-class integrity. Only 3 hits came up, but all had attachments. 2 were newsletters. The third was an internal memo labeled Q2 Enhancement Recommendations, Tier 1 Locations. She opened it, and there it was. A paragraph near the bottom, bulleted, red font. Refine boarding visual cues to align with aspirational brand perception. Minimize guest friction via nonverbal redirection techniques. Gate-level discretion to override irregular profiles encouraged where documentation is ambiguous. Lydia leaned back in her chair. Gate-level discretion? This wasn't an accident. She clicked open a side folder. The boarding record for Flight 327, Gate 17. A technical report had been filed that morning, time-stamped 6:44 a.m., noting a format irregularity in the printed first-class tickets for 2 passengers, Caleb and Noah Halston. Her breath caught. The system log showed a manual override had been performed by a mid-level IT coordinator assigned to gate integrations. The name listed, Jordan Pike. Under authorization from E. Sharpe. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't an isolated incident. Someone had deliberately altered the formatting code for those 2 boarding passes, enough to raise red flags in the system without outright canceling them. Enough for someone like Lorraine to believe, or pretend to believe, they were fake. She immediately rang Benjamin's direct line. In his private cabin aboard Flight 327, Benjamin took the call, his face tightening as Lydia spoke. "You're sure?" he asked. "Positive," Lydia replied. "There's a back-end authorization from Sharpe, buried in a maintenance log. He flagged the tickets for reprint. The format irregularity wasn't a glitch. It was planted." Benjamin exhaled slowly. "So Lorraine had a reason. She had an excuse," Lydia corrected. "And someone made sure she'd have one." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "How much else is there?" "I think we're only seeing the smoke," she said. "But there's fire somewhere behind the curtain. I need full access to legacy email servers, Sharpe's included." "You'll have it," he said. "Pull everything." He hung up and sat in silence, staring out the window into the dusky sky over the Atlantic. Below the clouds, systems he had trusted, people he had trusted, were corroding the very foundation of the airline he built. His sons had been set up. Back at HQ, Lydia requested super user access through the cybersecurity team. Most of the old executive threads were archived in off-site storage, but a recent compliance overhaul had created automatic cloud backups of the past 5 years. She keyed in the terms: First Class plus profile, Sharpe plus discretionary screening, and brand cleansing. Within minutes, her monitor lit up with keywords and flags. And then she saw it. An email from Sharpe to a small internal list. 4 names, 3 VPs, and 1 external contractor. The subject line was mundane. Boarding optimization strategy, Q4 model. But the body included a short, haunting line. Maintain selective gate discretion. Encourage Lorraine and similar leads to trust instinct. If questioned, emphasize fraud prevention, not aesthetics. Then a second email, buried in a reply chain. Possible test candidates for integrity enforcement. Gate 17, Flight 327. Caleb and Noah H. fit discretionary criteria. Proceed per protocol. Lydia didn't breathe for a moment. They weren't just targeted. They were a test. A live demonstration of a policy designed to look clean from the outside until it wasn't. She hit print. 20 minutes later, Lydia stormed into Benjamin's office, a thick folder in hand. She placed it on his desk, face set like granite. "I have enough to burn him," she said. Benjamin opened the file, scanned the email headers, the attachments, the internal flags. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he looked up. "This gets out. We're not talking scandal," he said. "We're talking class action lawsuits, federal investigations, and a board that will panic." Lydia nodded. "Then let's get ahead of it. Own it. Dig it out before someone else does." Benjamin closed the folder. "No more smoke," he said. "It's time to pull back the curtain." The early morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Benjamin Halston's penthouse office, casting long streaks of gold across the polished wood floors. He sat at his desk, staring at the printed emails Lydia had uncovered. The weight of them wasn't just corporate, it was personal. His sons had been used, humiliated, and hurt. But now, it was clear they had been marked long before they ever arrived at Gate 17. A knock at the door broke his silence. "Come in," he said. Lydia stepped in, carrying a folder thicker than the one she delivered yesterday. She placed it on his desk gently, as if it were a live wire. Backgrounds on the IT team, the security contractor, financial ties, and one other thing, she said carefully. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "Other thing?" Lydia hesitated. "You asked me to find out how Sharpe knew about Caleb and Noah's travel plans. Who had access? Who leaked?" Benjamin leaned back slowly, arms folded. "And?" She opened the folder to a page with highlighted names. "Flight manifest data was only accessible to 4 people outside your family," she said. 2 executive assistants, your travel coordinator, and your cousin. Benjamin's gaze didn't move from the page. "Which cousin?" Lydia flipped to a page near the back. "Matthew Halston, former Air Force logistics analyst. You brought him into Atlas 6 years ago. Currently head of strategic partnerships." Benjamin said nothing for a long time. Lydia continued. "I checked access logs. Matthew downloaded the itinerary file labeled Halston Twins. Graduation surprise from your private network 2 days before the incident. He was at my house that weekend," Benjamin said, voice low. "Said he wanted to help coordinate the post-trip surprise." Lydia nodded. "I cross-referenced his financials. 5 days before the incident, he transferred $250,000 into a new holding account in the Caymans." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "From where?" "Wire transfer. Shell company. Registered under a firm linked to Everett Sharpe." Silence settled in the room like ash. Benjamin stood and walked slowly to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The city stretched out below, clean, ordered, untouchable. But now, even this view felt tainted. "I brought him in when he was broke," he said. "I gave him purpose, let him into my family." Lydia's voice was quiet. Sharpe needed someone close, someone with emotional leverage, and Matthew had motive. He's been passed over for promotions 3 times. The board never warmed to him. But if Sharpe promised him equity, influence, he sold out his own blood, Benjamin finished. His voice held no anger, just something heavier. Lydia hesitated, then added, "Sharpe promised him shares if there was a leadership transition. He didn't say you by name, but it was clear." Benjamin turned back toward her. "And Matthew knew?" "I can't prove that part," Lydia said. "But he didn't ask questions when he handed over the itinerary. He just sent it, on a secure channel flagged as vendor relations." Benjamin picked up the folder and closed it with slow deliberation. "I want him here," he said. "Today." 2 hours later, Matthew Halston walked into his cousin's office, a little too confident, a little too polished. The man had always been the charming one, smiling, affable, the perfect spokesperson. But today, his smile faltered at the sight of Lydia seated beside Benjamin, a thick file resting between them. "You wanted to see me?" Matthew asked, closing the door behind him. Benjamin gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sit." Matthew did, eyes flicking between them. Benjamin didn't speak at first. He opened the folder, turned it around, and slid it across the desk. "You recognize that account number?" Matthew's face changed, but only slightly. He leaned forward, glanced at the document. "I don't understand," he said smoothly. Lydia replied. "That account was created 5 days before Caleb and Noah were flagged at Gate 17. The funds came from a shell company tied to Sharpe's financial web. You accessed their itinerary before the funds landed." Matthew leaned back. "That doesn't prove anything." Benjamin spoke quietly. "It proves betrayal." "I didn't betray anyone," Matthew snapped. "You froze me out, Ben. You promised me a seat at the table when you took this company public. But when the time came, I got silence. That's not a justification. That's a confession. You built this place like a fortress," Matthew continued, bitterness rising. "No room for anyone else to grow. I gave you loyalty, and you gave me crumbs. You gave Sharpe access to my children," Benjamin said. "You helped him stage a spectacle to undermine my name. You set my sons up to be humiliated in front of the world." Matthew's facade cracked for the first time. "I didn't know they'd be hurt," he muttered. "That wasn't part of the deal." Benjamin stood. "There was no deal, Matthew. There was only your decision, and now there's mine." Matthew swallowed hard. "What are you going to do?" Benjamin looked to Lydia, who handed him a pre-printed letter. "You're terminated. Effective immediately. Legal will follow up regarding breach of trust and corporate sabotage. I suggest you retain counsel." Matthew's face went pale. "Ben, please. We're family." Benjamin cut him off with a single look. "No," he said. "You lost that right the moment you made my sons pawns in your pathetic power grab." Matthew stood slowly, defeated. Without another word, he walked out of the office. As the door closed behind him, Benjamin exhaled and sat again. Lydia waited a beat. "You okay?" "No," he said. "But I'm clear." He tapped the desk. "We're past exposure now. We're into accountability." He looked toward the door, then at Lydia. "I want every ally we have, every proof. If this is war, we fight it with the truth." In the towering silence of Atlas Air's executive conference wing, Everett Sharpe sat alone at the head of a glass table, his fingers steepled, his posture perfect. He stared out the window as if contemplating cloud patterns, but his mind was elsewhere, calculating, shifting pieces on a mental chessboard. Unlike Benjamin Halston, Everett didn't operate in spotlights. He thrived in shadow. To most employees, Sharpe was a ghost, appearing only in internal newsletters, always mentioned but rarely seen. While Benjamin commanded stages and press conferences, Everett curated data, made quiet phone calls, and built alliances that were invisible until too late. And now, he was closer than ever to claiming what he believed should have been his all along. He devoted 18 years to Atlas Air, longer than almost any other executive. He'd steered them through recessions, navigated fuel crises, slashed operating costs when others panicked. But when Benjamin had restructured the board 2 years earlier, Everett was passed over for elevation to Chief Strategy Officer. The move had stung. Not just because of pride, but because he saw it as a clear message. You're good enough to clean up messes, not lead. That was the moment things shifted. 3 months after the snub, Sharpe began quietly assembling what he later referred to as the contingency network. It began with whispers, private dinners with disillusioned board members, unrecorded calls to suppliers who felt squeezed under Benjamin's aggressive market tactics. He tapped into frustration, painted a future in which Atlas Air was run by pragmatists, not visionaries chasing press coverage. The network grew. Then came the subtle sabotage, delays in vendor payments that created minor media headlines, a mysteriously canceled promotional partnership in Europe, an employee satisfaction survey that leaked to the press before legal could approve its release. All connected, all untraceable, but none of it big enough to force a leadership change. Sharpe needed something seismic. Enter the Halston twins. When Matthew Halston, bitter and eager for a way in, reached out through a mutual financial contact, Sharpe saw opportunity. The CEO's sons were the key. If he could engineer a scandal that touched Benjamin's family, that exposed hypocrisy inside Atlas while simultaneously raising shareholder alarm, he could finally break Benjamin's stranglehold on the company. So he funded it. He directed a quiet payment to a media consulting group disguised as a market analysis vendor. Their real job? Track the Halston twins. Feed suggestions to airline employees. Coordinate with influencers prepared to amplify any incident that broke online. They didn't need to manufacture the moment. Just be ready when it happened. And it worked better than he imagined. Lorraine Whitaker, a known loyalist to the brand image campaign, had been more than willing to act on a suspicious ticket. The system had been seeded with just enough irregularity to make her believe she was following protocol. The results had exceeded expectations. Except for one problem. He hadn't anticipated Benjamin's response. At that moment, in another wing of headquarters, Benjamin and Lydia sat in a secure strategy room reviewing intelligence gathered over the past 48 hours. What started as whispers had formed a picture. "You're sure he authorized the consulting firm?" Benjamin asked. "Yes," Lydia said. "We tracked the shell company used to pay the media outfit. It's called Parallax Dynamics, registered in Nevada. On paper, it's a data firm. In reality, it's linked to 3 high-profile crisis events in the last 5 years, all of them involving executive oustings." "And who owns Parallax?" "Sharpe's former fraternity brother. They've shared real estate holdings for over a decade." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Any ties to competitors?" Lydia flipped the page. "Yes, Callaway Airways. Martin Callaway personally received internal route projections via an encrypted Dropbox link registered to a server we traced back to." She paused. "Say it," Benjamin said. "Sharpe's home IP." Benjamin leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "So, he wasn't just sabotaging from within. He was selling us out." Lydia added, "The link included expansion plans, high-yield route forecasts, and VIP customer data. If Callaway hadn't gotten greedy and tried to leverage it into a hostile bid, we might never have noticed." Benjamin stood, his jaw rigid. "Then it's time to bring the phantom into the light." That afternoon, Sharpe entered the boardroom with his usual composure. He expected a skirmish, not a war. The room, however, was full. Not just of executives, but attorneys, 2 federal observers, and a media liaison. Benjamin stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back. "Thank you for joining us, Everett," he said evenly. Sharpe nodded slowly. "Of course, though I wasn't briefed on the agenda." Benjamin motioned to Lydia, who placed a thick binder in front of Sharpe. "That's the agenda." Sharpe flipped it open. The first page contained a brief summary. Subject: Internal breach investigation, executive operations, data leaks, and coordinated misconduct. He turned the page. There was an email. His email. The one linking him to Parallax. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice tight. "Does it matter?" Lydia asked. "You sent it." Sharpe's gaze flicked around the room. "I'd like legal counsel present." "You'll have it," Benjamin replied. "After this presentation." He turned to the room. "For the past 3 years, Atlas Air has been infiltrated, not by outsiders, but by its own leadership. Everett Sharpe, our Vice President of Finance and Strategic Operations, has not only manipulated internal systems to destabilize passenger trust, but also sold confidential data to a competitor, all under the guise of preserving the brand." Sharpe stood. "This is absurd." Benjamin raised a hand. "You orchestrated a campaign that led to the public humiliation of 2 teenagers, my sons, for the sake of a narrative. You violated every principle this company was built on. Silence. Sharpe's face hardened. You have no idea how fragile your empire is. You think it runs on values. It runs on perception. Benjamin walked slowly toward him. Then let me reshape the perception. Starting now. He turned to the observers. Effective immediately, I am placing Everett Sharpe on administrative leave pending full investigation and prosecution. Legal will coordinate with the DOJ and FAA compliance. Sharpe opened his mouth to protest, but security had already entered. They flanked him, silent and professional. You'll regret this, Sharpe hissed as they escorted him out. Benjamin didn't reply. He only said, loud enough for the room to hear, "We're done letting phantoms dictate our future." The replacement flight to Paris, Atlas Air Flight 329, departed 3 hours behind schedule. But to Caleb and Noah, time felt strangely suspended. After the chaos, the press, the blood, and accusations, they were finally in the air, wrapped in the pristine silence of first class. But even the luxurious seats, fine china service, and perfumed cabin air couldn't shake the unease that lingered between them. Caleb adjusted his seat, then leaned over toward his brother. "You sure you still want to do this?" Noah didn't look up. He was staring out the window at the cloud banks reflecting the amber glow of a setting sun. "She wanted us to cancel. Whoever they were. Sharpe, Lorraine, whoever. They wanted us to back down. We don't do that." Caleb nodded, his face unreadable. "Okay, then we go all the way." A flight attendant approached. A man in his early 30s with dark, perfectly styled hair and a tailored uniform that looked slightly too crisp, like it had just come out of a catalog. His name tag read Andrew. "Gentlemen," he said with a polished smile, "on behalf of the Atlas team, I want to personally apologize for what happened earlier. We're honored to have you with us today. May I offer you something to drink? Sparkling water? Juice? We have a new mocktail menu launching next month. Would you like a preview?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. Just water is fine." Noah, without turning his head, said, "Same." Andrew nodded. "Coming right up." He moved gracefully down the aisle. Caleb watched him go, then muttered, "Weird energy." Noah finally looked away from the window. "Yeah, too polite." Caleb smirked. "Is that even possible?" Noah shrugged. "It is when it feels rehearsed." A few minutes later, Andrew returned with their drinks on a silver tray. He set them down gently, then lingered. "I hope the rest of your flight experience is smoother," he said. "You know, I've worked first class for nearly 8 years. I've never seen anything like what happened at Gate 17. Caleb stiffened slightly. "Yeah, it was a first for us too." Andrew nodded solemnly. "People assume money looks a certain way. It's a shame. You two handled yourselves with dignity." Noah offered a polite smile, but his eyes were narrowing. "Thanks." There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional, before Andrew added, "I was actually there earlier, near the gate. Watched the whole thing from a distance." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Is that right?" "Yes," Andrew said. "And it made me think, this isn't just about a bad employee. This is systemic. People deserve to know. If someone wanted to share their story, I know a few channels." Noah set down his glass. "Are you actually a flight attendant?" Andrew blinked. Caleb leaned forward slightly. "Because most flight attendants don't reference channels and media exposure 5 minutes after takeoff." Andrew exhaled, smiled sheepishly, and reached into his coat pocket. He withdrew a slim card and handed it to Caleb. It read, "Daniel Foreman, investigative journalist, airwave report." Noah chuckled under his breath. "Knew it." "I'm sorry," Daniel said quickly. "I didn't mean to deceive you. I really do work part-time with Atlas, contracted through an event staffing partner. They sometimes pull from mixed talent pools for VIP routes, but I've also been embedded on flights for stories. This was personal. You don't have to talk to me. I just thought, if you ever wanted to tell it your way, I'd make sure it wasn't twisted." Caleb stared at the card, then flicked it back onto the tray. "You're on our flight. You're not our friend." Noah, more measured, said, You could have asked for an interview through our father's office. Daniel raised a hand. You're right. I pushed, and I crossed a line. He stepped back, voice lower now. I know it doesn't mean much, but I wasn't trying to exploit you. I wanted to make sure people didn't forget by next week, when the hashtags fade. He left them in silence after that, disappearing into the galley. Later, as the cabin dimmed for the overnight stretch of the flight, Caleb sat upright while Noah tried to sleep beside him. He couldn't. His mind kept cycling. What if he's right? Caleb whispered suddenly. Noah cracked an eye open. About what? If this blows over, if we don't talk, if the company walks it all back. Noah sat up, rubbing his face. That's not gonna happen. Dad's not letting this go. Still, Caleb said, voice quieter now. I keep thinking about that moment. When Lorraine looked at us like we didn't belong. It wasn't just about race or age or clothes. It was like she was trained to think like that. She was, Noah said. Caleb nodded. So, how deep does it go? Neither of them had an answer. 2 rows behind them, Daniel Foreman sat typing quietly into his encrypted laptop. He hadn't lied. He'd seen a lot in his time covering aviation industry scandals, price fixing, FAA violations, predatory union busting. But this felt different, because it was so personal, so deliberate. He wrote, "The Halston incident isn't an accident, it's a pattern. A quiet culture engineered to look clean on the outside while filtering passengers based on a profile no one dares define in writing. But now, the system has cut the wrong skin." He paused, then deleted the last line. Too poetic. Not his voice. He typed again. This story isn't about 2 rich kids. It's about how we all get silently sorted into categories, and what happens when someone says, "No more." He hit save. In the cockpit, the captain keyed the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be descending into Charles de Gaulle in approximately 40 minutes. Local weather is clear and a pleasant 68 degrees. We thank you for choosing Atlas Air and wish you a memorable stay in Paris." As the chime faded, Noah glanced out the window again. The lights of Europe shimmered below, far too calm for what they had left behind. "You ready to land?" Caleb asked. Noah nodded. "But I don't think we're touching down," he said. "I think we're just getting started." The Atlas Air shareholder emergency meeting was called for 9:00 a.m., and by 8:15, the conference center was already packed. Investors, board members, legal observers, and media affiliates filled the vast glass atrium where the company typically hosted annual events. But this time, there were no glossy welcome kits, no smiling interns with coffee trays. Just tension. Benjamin Halston stood behind a podium dressed in a crisp navy suit, eyes scanning the room like a general before battle. Lydia Marsh stood just to his right, her laptop linked into the main display. On the screen behind them was a single stark phrase, "Emergency vote. No confidence in executive leadership." A murmur rippled through the audience. Benjamin spoke first. "Thank you for coming on short notice. I will make this brief. Atlas Air has a rot in its core, one that's not about quarterly profits or fuel hedging, but about ethics, about trust, about the soul of the company." He paused. Let the silence work. The events of the past week, culminating in a calculated act of discrimination against my sons, were not random. They were orchestrated, funded, and executed by individuals within our own ranks. Specifically, Everett Sharpe. Gasps echoed across the rows. Benjamin continued, his voice steady. Sharpe created a secret network, leaked data to competitors, sabotaged internal systems, and authorized manipulative media operations. And he used my sons as pawns to fracture this company's leadership and position himself for takeover. He looked directly at the board. "Today, we vote to remove him permanently and begin the process of rebuilding this company's culture from the inside out." But before anyone could respond, a voice called out from the back, "Point of order." Everyone turned. Everett Sharpe walked slowly down the center aisle, flanked by 2 attorneys, his expression calm and unreadable. He stepped up to a side microphone. As much as I appreciate the theater, I must remind the board and our shareholders that emergency leadership votes are bound by specific procedural guidelines. He held up a thin blue folder. According to the Atlas Charter, any shareholder vote regarding executive removal must allow for 10 calendar days' notice to all preferred stakeholders. That hasn't happened. Therefore, this vote, while dramatic, is invalid. Benjamin narrowed his eyes. You're quoting from the 2004 amendment. That clause was updated 2 years ago when we shifted to rapid response governance. Everett smiled thinly. Except that update was never ratified. It was proposed, not approved. I checked with legal this morning. He turned to the room. This meeting can continue, but any decisions made today will be symbolic at best and legally void. For a moment, silence fell like a gavel. Investors shifted uncomfortably. A few board members leaned toward one another, whispering. The tension swung like a pendulum, momentum bleeding from Benjamin's case. Then Lydia stepped forward. If I may, she said, eyes on Everett, I'd like to offer new evidence to the board and stakeholders. Evidence that may override any procedural debate. Everett rolled his eyes. Unless you have a constitutional rewrite, it's not relevant. I have something better, she replied. Intent and financial crime. She tapped her keyboard. The screen behind Benjamin changed. A document appeared, a bank statement, followed by a wiring record, then a flagged alert from the company's compliance software. This, Lydia said, is a transfer from an offshore account tied to Parallax Dynamics, Mr. Sharpe's shadow media firm. The recipient, Lorraine Whitaker, 5 days before the Gate 17 incident. Gasps erupted around the room. Lydia didn't stop. The amount was $75,000, labeled as consulting services. Lorraine doesn't run a consultancy, but she does have a mortgage, 2 daughters in college, and, up until recently, a perfect record at this company. She clicked again. More documents. These are internal emails between Sharpe and 2 unnamed board members discussing how to trigger a shareholder crisis centered on leadership optics. The plan was to provoke a scandal, then argue that Benjamin Halston's position had become a liability. Everett raised a hand. These could be fabricated. They've already been verified, Lydia replied. Time-stamped, logged, and pulled directly from our secure backup server, which, I should add, Sharpe attempted to delete access to 2 days ago. All eyes turned back to Benjamin. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "We no longer need a vote. Mr. Sharpe, you're under federal investigation. You're suspended pending criminal proceedings." Sharpe stood frozen. His attorneys conferred quietly, one already dialing a phone. Benjamin turned to the board. Now let's talk about how we lead from here. In the hallway outside, Lydia caught her breath. You timed that perfectly, Benjamin said as he joined her. I had to, she said. We only got the offshore trail confirmed this morning. He nodded. Good work. Lydia hesitated. There's something else. Sharpe wasn't acting alone. He had board support. One of the messages came from Harper. Benjamin didn't flinch. Let's save that for the next meeting. She raised an eyebrow. You're not going to stop, are you? No, he said. Now that we've pulled back the curtain, I want every name. As they walked back into the atrium, applause broke out. Not for victory, but for clarity. The fog of confusion, procedure, and shadow had lifted. The company wasn't healed yet, but the truth was on record. And for the first time in weeks, that was enough. The broadcast was scheduled for 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Every major network had cleared time for it. News anchors teased it for hours in advance. The woman at the center of the Atlas Air scandal speaks out tonight, for the first time. Lorraine Whitaker hadn't slept in 3 days. She sat in the dimly lit studio, a powder brush touching up her cheekbones, lights warming her skin. The makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion carved into her eyes or the tremble in her hands. Across from her sat Diane Keller, one of America's most respected journalists, graceful, sharp, and unrelenting. The countdown began in Lorraine's ear. "Live in 5, 4, 3. The red light flared on. Diane turned to the camera. "Good evening. Tonight, we bring you an exclusive interview with Lorraine Whitaker, the former Atlas Air flight attendant at the center of a viral controversy that's shaken one of the world's largest airlines to its core." She looked to Lorraine. "Ms. Whitaker, thank you for being here." Lorraine nodded softly. "Thank you for giving me the chance to speak." Diane's voice remained neutral. "You've been called a lot of things this week. Racist, gatekeeper, pawn. Why did you agree to speak now?" Lorraine looked down at her lap, then up at the camera. "Because I owe someone an apology," she said, voice raw. "And because it's time the truth came out." She took a breath, then spoke slowly, deliberately. "I was wrong." The studio went silent except for the soft hum of the lights. "I wronged 2 young men, Caleb and Noah Halston. I judged them by their clothes, their age, their skin. I assumed they didn't belong in first class. I accused them of fraud. I tore up their tickets. I hurt one of them, and I humiliated them in front of strangers. Strangers with phones." She paused. Her eyes glistened. "But it wasn't just me." Diane leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Lorraine shook her head. "We were told, quietly, unofficially, to protect the brand, to keep first class a certain way. We weren't told to discriminate. No one ever said those words. But we were rewarded when we redirected passengers who didn't fit the image. We got better shifts, fewer complaints filed against us, compliments from higher up." "From who?" Diane asked. Lorraine hesitated. "Everett Sharpe and others. I don't know all their names, but I followed their system." She wiped at her eye with a tissue, then surprised everyone, including herself, by laughing bitterly. "Funny thing is, I never used to be that person. But over time, I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that I was preserving standards." Diane let the silence linger. "And now?" she asked. Lorraine looked directly into the lens. "Now I see it for what it was. Prejudice in a blazer. Discrimination dressed up as brand management." Then came the moment no one expected. Lorraine's voice broke. "I had a son," she said, barely above a whisper. Diane sat up straighter. "Excuse me?" "A son," Lorraine repeated. "His name was Malcolm. He wanted to be a pilot more than anything in the world." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, creased photo. Her, with a young boy in a flight cap. He applied to a private aviation academy when he was 19. We couldn't afford it. I tried everything, loans, scholarships, nothing worked. He got rejected, and I watched the light leave his eyes. The emotion in her voice hit like a wave. He gave up, drifted, took jobs that never went anywhere. He died 3 years ago. Car accident. Alone. The studio was deathly quiet. When I saw Caleb and Noah walk up to that gate, all I saw was how different their lives would be from his, how they had what he never did. I didn't see 2 boys. I saw what my son never got. She wiped her face again. I was angry at the world, at myself, and I took it out on them. She turned again to the camera. "Noah, Caleb, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. No one does." She reached for the tissue box again. "I thought I was doing my job, but I failed as a human being." Back at Atlas Air's Crisis Command Center, Benjamin and Lydia watched the live feed in silence. Noah and Caleb, now back from Paris, sat together on a couch behind them. Neither spoke for a long time after Lorraine finished. Finally, Caleb exhaled. "I didn't expect that." Noah looked down at the floor. "She had a son." Benjamin nodded. "Yes, and pain that hadn't healed." Lydia broke the silence. "This will shift the narrative." "You think people will forgive her?" Caleb asked. "They might not," Lydia said, "but they'll understand her." Benjamin remained quiet, eyes still fixed on the screen. "She confessed to the world," he said, "not to escape punishment, but because she couldn't carry it anymore. He turned to his sons. "You know what that means, don't you?" Caleb nodded. "It means she's not the villain. She's one of many who lost their way." That night, the internet roared to life again, but this time with something different. The hashtags changed. Hashtag Atlas Bias was still trending, but now alongside hashtag Lorraine Speaks and hashtag Redemption Air. Some were furious, others stunned, many conflicted. I hated her, but that interview wrecked me. She's broken and she's honest. We talk about accountability. That was it, raw, real. Forgivable? She's not off the hook, but she's not alone in this either. Atlas built her like that. The following morning, Benjamin issued a public statement. Ms. Whitaker's confession is a sobering reminder that systems fail people long before people fail each other. Atlas Air is committed to building a company where no one has to choose between compassion and compliance. And, to everyone's surprise, Lorraine sent a personal letter to Benjamin's office, handwritten, unprompted. It was short, but heartfelt. "I hope someday your sons will remember me not as the woman who broke their trust, but as the one who tried, at the end, to be honest. Thank you for showing more dignity in response than I ever showed in action. I'm sorry. I will be sorry every day." Benjamin didn't respond publicly, but he kept the letter in the top drawer of his desk. The boardroom was silent except for the shuffle of papers and the occasional anxious cough. The long mahogany table, usually a place of polished routine and shareholder confidence, now pulsed with uncertainty. Outside, the media lined the sidewalk, waiting for the verdict that could determine the fate of Atlas Air. Inside, the mood was volatile. The board was split, exactly down the middle. On one side, those who believed in Benjamin Halston's vision, however battered it had become. On the other, those who felt the scandal, the investigations, and the viral embarrassment had cost them too much. Stock had dropped 24% in the last 10 days. Corporate clients were pulling contracts. Analysts were whispering about instability. And then came the final blow, Martin Calloway. The CEO of Callaway Airways strode into the room like a man who already owned it. His dark gray suit gleamed under the lights. Behind him were two attorneys and a merger specialist from Goldman Sachs. He didn't wait for an invitation. He took the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martin said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "I come with a solution, not a hostile takeover, not a PR stunt, but an offer of stability for your shareholders, your employees, your customers." He handed out a packet, one for each board member. "The terms are straightforward. Callaway Airways offers to acquire Atlas Air at a premium-adjusted rate based on current market evaluation. The offer is firm, non-negotiable, and expires in 72 hours. Benjamin stared at the top sheet. The number was bold, calculated, ruthless. 60% of Atlas Air's pre-scandal market value. 40% below what we're worth, Benjamin said, his voice quiet. Martin smiled. What you were worth. Not what the market believes you're worth now. A murmur swept through the room. Some board members were flipping through the offer. Others stared at Benjamin, gauging his reaction. Martin pressed forward. This merger would protect shareholder equity, preserve most staff positions, and allow Atlas Air's name to live on, under a new parent brand, of course. Benjamin stood. You're trying to pick over the bones of a company you couldn't compete with. Martin shrugged. Or rescue it from a slow collapse. Either way, the decision is yours. The numbers don't lie. He turned to the board. Vote with your heads, not your headlines. For a moment, no one moved. And then Douglas Harper, one of the swing voters, leaned forward. We should consider it, he said. The damage is real, and we have a fiduciary duty to our investors. Others nodded. Benjamin's hand tightened at his sides. He was watching everything he'd built slip through fingers stained by someone else's betrayal. Lydia looked at him from across the table. She whispered, It's close. One more vote, and they swing the whole board. Benjamin took a step toward the podium, but the door opened, and Caleb Halston walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a black button-down and jeans. But somehow, as he strode forward, every head turned. Noah followed, a step behind, silent and steady. "I know I'm not a shareholder," Caleb said, voice strong. "But I have something to say." Martin scoffed. "This is a board meeting, and it's your company he's trying to steal," Caleb said, nodding toward Benjamin. Benjamin hesitated, then stepped aside. Caleb took the center of the room. "I don't know most of you. I don't understand corporate law or shareholder returns, but I do know what this airline meant to our family." He looked at Martin. "You're offering a lifeboat, but we're not sinking. We're in a storm. There's a difference." A few board members leaned forward. "My brother and I were humiliated," Caleb continued, "and I won't pretend it didn't hurt. But you know what stuck with me? What my mom used to say before she passed." He took a breath. She said, "If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything." The words hung in the air like church bells. "She wasn't talking about stocks," Caleb said. "She was talking about values, about who we are when it's hard, not just when it's easy." He turned to the board. "You want numbers? Here's one. 17,000 employees count on you. 42 million passengers a year. This isn't just a business. It's a legacy. You want to sell it for 40 cents on the dollar because of bad press and scared investors? Go ahead." He looked at his father. "But if you believe in the reason Atlas was built, don't sell it. Fix it." Silence. Then one board member, Marilyn Reyes, spoke. "I've been on this board 12 years, and that's the clearest voice I've heard in weeks." She pushed the offer packet aside. "I vote no." Then came another, and another. Douglas Harper stared at his packet, then looked up. He exhaled. "I vote no." A final count revealed it. The merger proposal was defeated by one vote. Martin's jaw tightened. He gathered his papers. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Emotion doesn't save companies." "No," Benjamin replied, "but it reminds us why they matter." Martin left without another word. After the meeting, Benjamin stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. Caleb and Noah joined him. "You didn't have to do that," Benjamin said. "I know," Caleb replied, "but you raised us not to back down." Benjamin looked at both sons, then nodded. "Your mother would be proud." Noah smiled faintly. "She's the reason we stayed standing." Benjamin turned to Lydia, who stood nearby. "We just bought ourselves time," he said. "Let's not waste it." She nodded. "We rebuild, from the bones up." And so began the final phase, not survival, but redemption. 6 months later, the headquarters of Atlas Air looked nothing like it did during the storm. Gone were the stiff marble hallways and austere executive suites that once symbolized corporate prestige. In their place, sunlight, open glass, wall displays showcasing customer feedback, employee milestones, and framed photos of everyday passengers who had become unexpected heroes during the company's reckoning. The company had survived the scandal, but more than that, it had been reborn. At the center of it all stood Benjamin Halston, no longer the untouchable aviation mogul behind a fortified desk, but a man who had faced his company's darkest truth and walked through it carrying only integrity and purpose. He had not been removed. He had not resigned. Instead, he had rebuilt. On the tarmac at Chicago's O'Hare International, a massive banner rippled above a freshly painted Atlas Air aircraft. Its new livery shimmered in metallic blue and white, with one phrase stretched proudly along the fuselage: "Clear Skies Initiative, dignity in every seat." The initiative was the culmination of everything Benjamin, his team, and his sons had fought for. A public, measurable commitment to equitable hiring, unbiased service training, and full transparency in customer treatment policies. On the dais near the jet bridge, Benjamin stepped up to the microphone. His sons, Caleb and Noah, stood behind him, flanked by Lydia Marsh and several newly appointed department heads, half of whom were promoted from within after a comprehensive audit revealed years of suppressed potential. 6 months ago, Benjamin began, this airline was on the edge, not just of a PR crisis, but of forgetting who we were. He paused, scanning the crowd. We built Atlas on the idea that excellence could come from anywhere, but somewhere along the way, we let fear and familiarity reshape that idea into exclusivity. He gestured toward the plane behind him. Clear Skies is not a PR campaign. It's a promise. Every passenger deserves respect. Every employee deserves opportunity. And every child, regardless of background, deserves to board a plane without wondering if they belong. A wave of applause followed. Benjamin turned toward his sons. Caleb and Noah didn't just experience injustice, they stood against it, quietly, powerfully, without raising their voices or throwing punches. They let their dignity speak. More applause. Behind the crowd, a woman stood partially in shadow, wearing a plain blouse and holding a small envelope. She didn't approach the stage. She didn't speak. But she watched. It was Lorraine. She had not returned to Atlas Air. After her public confession and voluntary cooperation with the federal investigation, she chose not to fight for her position. Instead, she quietly began working with a nonprofit that helped underprivileged youth access aviation careers. No interviews, no book deals, just work. A month after the scandal, she mailed a letter, handwritten, personal, and addressed not to Benjamin, but to Caleb and Noah directly. Dear Caleb and Noah, you don't owe me forgiveness, but I owe you the truth. I let bitterness blind me. I let my own pain define how I saw others. I looked at you and saw what my son never had, and instead of feeling hope, I felt resentment. That wasn't your fault. I am so deeply sorry. You showed me what grace looks like. Thank you for not becoming what the world tried to turn you into that day. Lorraine Whitaker. Noah kept the letter in the drawer beside his bed at Columbia. Caleb kept a scanned copy in his cloud storage, next to flight training manuals and tech startup drafts. Inside Atlas, the reforms didn't stop with new paint and new slogans. Under the Clear Skies initiative, customer service staff underwent immersive bias and empathy training, mandatory, certified, and recurring. Promotion pathways were overhauled to ensure qualified employees from all departments and backgrounds had access to leadership roles. All customer complaints were routed through a new independent ethics committee, composed of employees, passengers, and community leaders. Anonymous reporting systems were upgraded, and every manager was now rated on inclusion as well as performance. And perhaps most significantly, Atlas Air launched the First Class for All scholarship, partnering with aviation schools to sponsor young talent from underserved communities who dreamed of flight. The first recipient? A 17-year-old girl from Atlanta named Marley who wanted to be a pilot, like the ones who don't flinch when you tell them where you're from. When she boarded her first training flight, she wore a pin on her lapel that read, "You belong in this sky." That evening, as the ceremony ended and the media cleared out, Benjamin sat on a bench near the edge of the runway, tie loosened, jacket folded beside him. The sun dipped low, bathing the tarmac in copper and gold. Caleb walked up behind him. That was a hell of a speech. Benjamin smiled. Wasn't about the speech. Noah joined them, carrying 3 cups of coffee. It was about the silence after. Benjamin accepted the cup. That's when you know people heard it. For a while, they sat in peace, watching the planes lift off one by one. "I've thought a lot about what you said in that meeting," Benjamin said, glancing at Caleb. "The quote?" He nodded. "If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Your mother used to say that all the time." Caleb chuckled. "She said it to me once when I dropped a math class because I didn't like the professor." Noah smirked. "And you still barely passed trig." They all laughed. Then Benjamin grew serious again. "Thank you, both of you, for standing when I couldn't." Caleb shook his head. "You never stopped standing, Dad. You just needed us to remind you which direction." Noah raised his coffee. "To Clear Skies." Benjamin clinked his cup with theirs. to never forgetting what it took to earn them. Atlas Air didn't become perfect overnight. There were still delays, complaints, weather. People, after all, were people. But one thing had changed. Now, every flight carried a legacy born not from branding, but from truth. And every passenger carried the hope that maybe, just maybe, the skies above them had room for everyone.